Hi, my name is Miljana, a female entrepreneur, passionate about inspiring other females in creating a life they love and sovereignty, while developing businesses with a positive impact. I grew up on a small farm surrounded by cows, sheep, chickens, dogs, cats, and nature. That's where I learned that a natural, sustainable way is sometimes the best way. I think it is how our modern world can heal itself from the inside out. I strive to do what makes me happy, work with people that inspire, and share some of these moments with you. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining me yet another fruitful talk. So today I have Sovereign here, who is going to share her story with us and her podcast, which I will keep. I'll keep it just for a minute, and she will get to share with you. What's the word like? The word tease? No. When you don't want to reveal it right away, you want to give
Yeah,
people.
tease. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Is it
So I'm gonna
in?
say so. And I'm gonna keep it as a tease, because I'm not gonna share the podcast name with you yet. She will do that in a minute. So thank you for joining me today and welcome. Could you please introduce yourself for my viewers?
My name is Sovereign Sidmonu, and I'm a multi-passionate person. Like that's possibly like the best thing if I'm not saying the podcast name.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just a multi-passionate
Well,
artist.
welcome again. And we love multi-passionate people here.
Yeah.
And that's why you're here sharing your story, because the goal is to show people that you can accomplish anything you like in this world. And you are doing that. And thank you for being here to share your story. So, okay, so let's dive into our conversation. I like to start this conversation with asking a qualitative question, actually. It is, what is your life purpose? And do you know, and do you have one?
Yeah, so I do have a life purpose. It came to me last year. Yeah, 2020. Ooh. It came to me in
What
the
a
beginning of
year.
2020. Yeah, right. What a year. It was. Interestingly enough, my life purpose, the way I would say it, is it's to love myself and share the love that I make with myself with others. So it has a lot of meaning to me. I feel like if someone heard that, you may not fully understand what went into crafting the words in that way. I think, thinking about it coming in a year of 2020, that was a hard year for all of us. I've never had to love myself harder than I've ever loved myself in 2020. Like that was a rough, challenging year. And I think when I think love, I think fairies and rainbows and whatever, but it was really
Mm-hmm.
hard. I had to love myself through things. I had to stop fixing myself. I had to stop talking to myself in specific ways because it got to a breaking point where I had to do that. And I think in terms of like, I was also practicing tantra a lot that year, and so thinking about living with an open heart of making love with everything in existence, right? That's kind of how I see tantra, which we can talk more about a little bit. But in practicing that, I see it as I'm trying to be a person who lives with a very open heart, and I can love anyone, anything as best as I can, including myself, where there's a lot of shortcomings, a lot of whatever. And I know that if I'm able to love myself through these hard times, through being a person who I never thought I would be, good or bad, being
Mm-hmm.
stressful, whatever that is, that I can love others and I can share whatever joy and happiness that I've created and cultivated within myself, peace of mind, peace of being, anything like that, with the world. Like that's all I have to give. So it's kind of, for me, a humbling place to come from, and a reminder that like it has to come from within. I have to know
Right.
it for myself and experience that in order for me to share it with others. So that's my,
Yeah.
this is,
And
maybe,
what a perfect time for it to come to you at this year,
yeah,
2020, and to carry you on, because though we've had the 2020 challenging, 2021 hasn't been any easier, in my opinion. So, and I wanted to, for the viewers, just how would you define tantra? Just in case nobody really knows what it is, can you give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think I've been thinking about Tantra for so many years, but last year I actually went ahead and took a course. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important first to note that a lot of like westernized versions of Tantra is like all sex, and
Mm.
sexual, you know, what's the Kama Sutra and like what do you Kama Sutra and like what position should I go in and things like that, right? For me, I see sex as a sacred energy exchange. And so that can happen at any time, at any place. I consider this conversation to be sexual. There's an exchange happening, right? We're creating two things. We're two people coming together to create one thing. And like, that's sex, right? Like the two chromosomes coming and creating, male and female coming and creating, right? It's not always male and female, but you know, if you think about these two polar opposite things coming together to create union, that to me is the universe, is like what we're here to do and to experience this unity with others. And that doesn't only mean people, that can mean things, that can mean animal, that could be life. So how am I constantly being that way, and also being a sensual being, right? How am I constantly receiving through my eyes, my ears, my taste buds, my flesh, right? How am I actually receiving and engaging in this kind of like sexual way with the universe constantly? So it's led me down a lot of really interesting paths that have been really fun. But I think it's an aspiration for me to be a very tantric person, a very sensual person, a very sensitive person, a very loving person, to everyone, everything, everywhere, at any time. And it's a really hard skill. And that's even something in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, like loving is a skill that I'm building, right? And how do I do that better? How do I constantly try to work on, not even work on that, love myself more? So yeah, that to me is tantra, and you know, people have their different definitions, but that to me is what tantra means for me.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's really going to be helpful for the people watching this interview and also understanding your project and how you connect to the universe and your contribution. So, next question for you is sustainability.
Mm.
I am a strong believer in it, and I think it's a very broad term. And often we think of sustainability as something related to just mother nature, when in reality it's all of us, right? Even us within. So how would you see yourself relate to this topic with your project and where you are in your life right now?
Ooh, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question because it brings up, it almost feels like two different types of sustainability. It feels like sustainability in your own energy and your own ability to
Mm-hmm.
consistently do something and be something and move forward. But then you think of sustainability, you know, as in treating Mother Earth well and treating your home well, because it's our home, right? We don't have any other place
Correct.
to go. And so for me, I definitely am or I try to be a sustainable person, but I understand that the challenges of it, both from an environmental standpoint. I actually used to be zero waste. So I would like, you know, make sure that I had like zero plastics, right? I would buy my own bags. I would go to stores and I would have my own containers and I'd only go to zero waste stuff. But it's actually it's not quite accessible actually everywhere. So I, you know, I have that element of it, and I think that comes into my work of like how do we love the earth well as well, right?
Mm.
Because to be honest, she's gonna do okay without us, and we're only like screwing over. Like she's been here for so long. We are, if you look at the time that we've been here, it's like 2 seconds compared to, you know, the rest of the earth and all that stuff. And if we, you know, implode on our own selves, she will find a way to recuperate just like we do. And so I think when I think of sustainability, I think of being in alignment with nature, right? There's a lot of things that are amazing that nature can do. Like we're sitting here talking to each other, and like that's so weird. Like our brains are understanding the vocal sounds that are coming out of my throat, and you completely understand what I'm saying, right? So like there's weird things happening. This is a magical universe that we're living in, and I think being in alignment with that rather than outside of that, you'll start finding it. You don't need to strive, which is the same thing when you're in alignment from a work perspective. Like you don't need to strive. You build up a momentum, and it's um, just happens organically or naturally, right? So I think it's this
Right.
of like being in alignment with nature, looking at the systems that nature has and seeing if you can be aligned with them, which is like, for me, and we can talk about the podcast later, but I do a lot of like pussy work, and that's how we know each other. And so, being in
Yeah.
alignment with cycles, being in alignment with what the moon's going on, being in alignment with, everything else is in alignment, and sometimes we lose sight of that, and that leaves us in a stressful kind of place because we're not where we want to be.
Yeah, I really want to one thing that stood out for me from what you were saying is us talking to each other, and then on top of that, talking to each other in different parts of United States. You are in Tulsa and I am in New York City, and that's even though us humans, created these tools to use, that's nature actually, we had to use nature resources to create that. And all the alignment, like how we're seeing this 20 and 21, 20 and 20, and then 2021, it's like shifting, it's transforming the humankind and nature at the same time, the environment. So um, when I think of sustainability, I think of the work that has to come within so we can actually work on things without. And that's exactly what you're saying, your work around um, sexuality, around pleasure, around like senses, around sharing with other people and having the conversation and being open about it and completely willing to share is, in my opinion, that inner work.
Hmm.
Even your purpose itself is about like having a loving relationship with yourself, and then having that relationship come like outside of you, like with people or with things or with animals or just like everyday life, and creating that balance. Yeah, thank you so much for putting it in that way for us. Okay, so now we can go into your project, which you already mentioned. It is around pussy, and I'll let you take the stage. What would you like to share with us about your project?
Um, yeah, I think when people hear the word pussy or I don't give it enough context, they don't um it allows you to kind of project onto me or whatever you feel your discomfort around that word. Um and I've had my own journey of discomfort around like pussy. So my podcast is called the Pussy Power Hour. And I think, when we think pussy power, we think feminist and everything, which is totally all of those things. But for me, I think it comes from a deeply spiritual place. I, end of 2019, quit my job. So it's so funny that you're talking about sustainability because I actually at the time was wanting to start a company around sustainability. Um, where I could help and manage people's like plastic waste and things like that, which like who knows, I may still get back into that. But I had
Right.
quit my job because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I thought maybe I should just explore and do something like really wild and crazy. So I bought
Mm.
a one-way ticket to Peru, and my hope was to, my hope
That's
was to
awesome.
Right, yeah, it was really dope. I just like kind of picked it because the price looked okay. Like there wasn't any real rhyme or reason. I just am a big solo traveler, and South America and Antarctica at the time were the last continents that I had never been on. So I want to make it to all seven. I didn't get to make it to Antarctica yet, but I will one day. So yeah, so I wanted to work on farms and be in nature, and I actually wanted to look at systems of nature and see how we can integrate that into how we relate with each other. So these systems
Mm.
are ancient, they're old, they're beautiful, and they have been working. And we're figuring things out the hard way. And I thought, I want to go work on a farm and understand nature and these cycles and like how things really work, right? So when I got there, I fell into a pit of despair because I had never had so much time on my hands. And it was so scary to think no one's expecting me anywhere. No one needs anything from me. I could become a homeless person on the side of the street or Bill Gates, and it's all my decision. And I had never come that close to reality before. It crushed me.
Wow.
Because before that, I'd given my time to jobs and school, and I always thought, these were the things that you need to do, but I didn't realize I was choosing them, right? And so to
Mm.
not have that and to have a gap and to think, what am I going to do to fill this space?
Mm.
And who am I now that I don't introduce myself as a person who has this job, right? Even when I introduced myself, I was like, I don't know, like I'm a multi-passionate person. And that is something that I've come across because I didn't have a job. And that's how we value people in the States, right? We always constantly say, "Oh, I'm sovereign. I'm a project manager. I'm a developer. I'm a this and that." And it's like that's so limiting, and I didn't realize how limiting it was, or how safe it was. So I'm sitting there and I'm in a depression, and I just don't know what to do. And so I start reading, I start looking at things, and I saw somewhere that Bill Gates has what he calls think weeks. And he basically goes into a cabin in the woods for a week or a few weeks and just reads and journals and writes. And then he comes out with these ideas, or he just feels like generated. And I thought, I'd like to be Bill Gates one day. I will do the same. And so I remember at that time I started, or actually before that, I started thinking like, I'm a witchy person, and affirmations and stuff just weren't working. And so I thought, actually, let me go look at what people say you shouldn't do in magic. Like, what's dark magic? What is that? So as I looked into it, I found goddesses and how we've been demonizing them, and we think that they're like the devil basically, but they're just women who orgasm and don't give a and don't care. They're women who like have no shame and they maybe have fears, but they overcome them, and they're these wild women. And so I started reading more about this and getting in alignment with my own nature in a way that I hadn't ever experienced, like woman goddesses. I thought there's so many ascended masters. Where are the women? Jesus is cool, but like, who else can I look to as like a spiritual leader, a spiritual person? So I started looking into goddesses and, found it very interesting. And so that kind of got me in touch with my womanhood, my pussy, because that is so forbidden to be in alignment with and to have pride about and to talk about. And, I realized I wasn't really connected to her. And I realized as I'm on this journey of connecting with my body, with what's going inside of me, I'm realizing like, whoa, there's so much power to who I am. And I've been told such lies. And I think what really got me about pleasure was when you start feeling good inside and consistently feeling good inside, like it's really hard for someone to shame you or for you to believe things. Like the soil isn't fertile for that anymore. Like you're like, no, that doesn't work for me. And like what works for me, and I'm okay with that. And that's terrifying to people. So I know that was a whole big ramble, but essentially, that is my background, right? Was just being on this journey. And that's even on the podcast, it's me sharing my journey. I'm not an expert on anyone's pussy but my own, and I'm barely an expert on that. So it's like, how do we share this journey collectively? How do we raise up the story of women and community and be in pleasure?
This movement that we're all in as women, where we want equality, I think that what you're doing is also a major part of that. And I think a lot of people also have this issue or thinking that femininity, like, there is a story out there that you're feminine, you are against man. And that's obviously not true. Femininity is really about just building equality from our strengths. We both men and women have our strengths and weaknesses, and no one can deny those, right? But if we're giving equal opportunity, then we can step into our strengths, because sometimes there's women who do things better than men do, that is particularly a man job, for example. Or there are things that men do very well, but it's particularly a woman job, so men are like, oh, that's not for me, when in reality they can do very, very good at it. And it's also about like feminine and masculine energy. We all have that in ourselves. We both all have the feminine and the masculine. And what you're bringing to is from a different perspective of like pleasure and fun and joy. And I read a book recently, and I think it's called Healing Your Body, and it
Mm,
talks about coming from a place of fun and pleasure and positivity, not from a place of like I'm broken, or or negativity, or like, oh my God, I'm sick. It's more like I'm healthy, and then you kind of attract more of that. So I think that's really what
mm,
you're talking about, just from a different angle that a lot of people avoid to talk about. And that is,
yeah.
as us, women, a major part of our life. We give birth as women, and we do it through our pussy. And we don't talk about it. We're like, it's forbidden. So I'm glad to have you, a person who is completely has a completely different perspective, and going on this journey and sharing it with people, because it's not about being an expert. It's about talking about it. It's about making a difference. It's about being open and connecting with others. So I thank you so much. And I guess now we can go more into your podcast. If you could you please share like your journey to end up at this podcast? I know you mentioned briefly that you had, thoughts before you quit your job and stuff like that. And I'm just curious, like, is there anything else that had you quit your job besides like caring for sustainability? Like, how is your journey like before, if you can remember it, and share a little bit with that? I'm just really curious because I feel like you'll be very useful for people watching this interview a
Yeah, I
bit.
do have the question. Even before I answer that question, I just wanted to like harp on a point that you mentioned of like, people think femininity and feminists are against man. And like for me, I guess maybe the perspective I'm coming up of like love and pussy, right? That's our first home, no matter who's on this planet. Like you came out of a pussy, man or woman. And when you think about that, right, from a feminist or feminine standpoint, you cannot hate men. You cannot hate men
Mhm.
if they come from you. You cannot, because then means you hate yourself, an aspect of yourself. And I think that goes back to my purpose of loving myself, right? I can give birth to a man, it's possible. And they come from us, right? They come from us. And there's this beautiful saying that like when women rule, and this is not saying like women need a rule, but it's like this energy, right? If we think women are feminine energy, like when the feminine energy is like in power, there's like often no war because no mother wants to send her child to die,
Mm,
right? And it's this feeling of course we can't hate you. We don't hate you. We create, you came out of us. You are a piece of me. You literally, your cells, your DNA, your everything has come from me. How can I hate my child or a creation
yeah,
that I've made? Right?
yeah,
And no, even if you're not, you're not exactly not disappointed with it sometimes, maybe, but you really don't hate it because you knew you would hate yourself. And then that's a whole nother conversation. So I think this concept of like men, women are against men, it's like maybe we're just upset about the way that things are happening, and that's okay too. But from my energetic standpoint, it's like no, we can't, and you can't sit here and say that you hate men because that's an aspect of yourself,
right,
right?
right. I absolutely agree
So
with
yeah.
you, and it actually gave me a goosebumps because
Mm,
it's so true. Like, I think that women are just upset, angry. Like, it has got to a point where it's literally choking us, and we're just like, well, there has to be some transformation in the way we live in this world and who we are in this world, because we contribute so much, just like men do. So it's more about, looking at that and giving credit where credit is due.
yeah, and
Um,
taking credit where
and
credit
taking
is
credit
in,
too, because
it's responsibility.
we as
It's
women
like
don't really know how to do that. We don't know how to
yeah,
take and receive the positive, the feedback, the compliments, the love, because we're so hard on ourselves because of who we have become through generations and generations. But to not to digress too much from the topic.
yeah.
um
hmm
yeah, I'll just.
But yeah, yeah. As in terms of my journey, so I've been very fortunate to work at companies that I actually really love.
Hmm,
My first job out of school, I did not love, and I promised myself I would never work at a job that I wasn't happy with, and the culture wasn't fitting for me. So I really love my former company that I worked at, and they're family to me, right? Like we are still all best friends. We hung out like all the time. There was not really an issue or a feeling of like, oh, I'm not feeling, well treated until the end. When I think, the company can be great, but if your like managers and whatever aren't challenging you, or at least for me, I need to be constantly challenged and learning. And if I don't, I get bored and I want to flee the nest.
hmm,
So I wasn't feeling that at the time with who I was managing, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to just jump teams, right? I also, and I can look back at this in hindsight and say it was actually a false perspective. I thought my job, a lot of us have this desire to like quit your job and go and start your business, and then you'll have all the time in the world. And I actually really urge people not to do that. I think this was a big mistake on my end, actually, that I've learned from, because I quit my job thinking that it was the obstacle. And one of my favorite French theorists, his name is Lacan. He has this really beautiful theory of imperfection. He says you usually have a perfect situation, but you search all the way around, you go all the way around the world looking for perfection, only to come back and see that what you had was perfect. And so at the time, I thought, I need to go somewhere and I need to think about stuff and this job is just draining my energy and taking it. And like, I can't do anything because of my job. And so I was in that mindset and I thought, let me quit my job and then start a business and like, go explore and do all this stuff. Right. What I didn't realize and what I realize now is that my job was offering me what it needed to offer me, which was security and stability and a consistent income. And that, because I had that, right, what we often think is the obstacle to our goals is actually the reason why we're able to even think of having those things, right? So when you're stressed about money, you're not thinking about what makes you happy. You're not thinking about what more you can contribute to the world. You're not thinking about that. You're thinking about money. So when you have a job, although it feels like this is the thing that's blocking you, it's actually the reason why you're able to have these grand, lofty ideas because you feel safe. You don't have grand, lofty ideas when you feel unsafe. So I, quit my job and did that. And I felt it was fine. I meant to travel, but then 2020 hit and I came back home and I was like, I'm going to start this business and do all this stuff. And like, I don't want to work yet. I want to do this, right? These things take time. Starting a business, getting money, like it doesn't have to, but it takes time. It can take time, right? For me, I think my business acumen started like maybe like 2 years before I actually launched a business. And even just in 2021 was when I actually made money that was enough that someone could possibly live off of, right? And so this takes time, and it's not that the actual actions take time, but depending on how far away you are from like the mentality that it takes and the level of personal development and grit, it takes grit. And if you don't have that in you because you've been cozied up your whole life, it's going to take you time to get there. From a mental standpoint, yes, the business actions can, you can make money, you can make a $10,000 in one day. Yes. But the person you need to be to make $10,000 in one day does not take one day
For
unless there's
most
a
of
really
us.
traumatic thing to you. Unless there's a gun to your head or you have to do it, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, like, don't quit your day job, but also don't quit your daydreams, right? So find a way to balance them both because it's not always that way for the majority of people.
Yeah. Okay. So how did the idea about the podcast, Pussy Power Hour, come
Yeah,
about?
sorry about that. I'm gonna rant.
You're
So the
fine.
podcast came about because I came back from my trip and I had an idea and I had been doing all this women's work, reading about goddesses when I was in South America. And so I was thinking, I'm also like a musician. So I was thinking, oh, I should do music. But I thought, oh, I can't make money off of that. Like I shouldn't do that. So this is actually a secondary idea that I had was like, I love talking. I love people find me interesting to engage with. Maybe I'll make a podcast. And so I partnered up with a friend at the time. And I thought, let's make a podcast together. And that was the easiest way for me to like, kind of get it up and running was to collaborate, right, with somebody. I think, trying to go at it alone will leave you real lonely and sad. So that's kind of how I got the idea. She was reading a book at the time called Pussy, a Reclamation by Regina Thomashauer. And we read it because I was wanting to do something around women and the pussy, but I hadn't had that word yet. And so we read this book and we started talking about it on a podcast. And that podcast ended last year, and now I'm relaunching the Pussy Power Hour. But yeah, that's how the idea came to me. It was intentional, but also a little bit organic. And
Okay.
so this podcast now is kind of building off of the work that we did before and coming in with like a new, fresh perspective of having really embodied some of these things that I've talked about on the podcast.
Yeah, and you also had some time to go through your own journey a little bit and then come with a
Yeah.
completely fresh outlook in mind for this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would you say was some of the greatest challenges for you so far when it comes to the podcast?
Starting is hard.
Okay.
Like the activation energy to start anything, I think is challenging. And I don't even know how to say it, but I guess having clearly defined goals and consistency is really hard when you work when you work for yourself by yourself. I think it emphasizes the need for community and collaboration when you do things. You have an idea and you really want to get it off the ground. I think it's really important that you kind of work in other people, and I think you learn. Like I think this is like starting a project and having it out there is like one of the biggest self development things you could ever do, because you see yourself for who you are. There's no one to blame. There's no one to look at and say, this is your fault, why this did or did not work. It is a very clear mirror of where your strengths and weaknesses lie and the kind of person you are, right? At the same time, when things get tough. And are you flexible enough, right? So I think that is the most challenging thing. It's like, I would describe it as like being at the edge of all of my cliffs and being asked to jump, right? Sometimes feels like no place is like safe yet, especially when you're starting, but you're at the edge of yourself, like in every way. It's like, I've never had a podcast before. I'm coming up against my self-worth. I'm asking people for money for things. I don't believe in myself. And the
Yeah.
same way that courage is not the absence of fear, it's just overcoming it. It's the same thing with confidence. It's like, it's not the absence of insecurity, it's just like overcoming it. So constantly overcoming it's challenging and it's different and it's not easy. And I think it can be meant for everybody, but I don't think everyone sees that and doesn't run.
Yeah, I completely get you, and I think that's the thing that also stops people from taking those actions because they actually have to look at themselves in such a profound way that I have never had to before, or and you're just like, oh, this is who I am, and it's scary. Like, I recall someone telling me that this person couldn't look in the mirror in their like in at themselves, and then let alone forget about looking in their eyes. Like, if they
Mm,
look in their eyes, they would just like get scared, like
mm,
scared to the point where it's just like a panic attack. So,
mm,
yeah, starting your own project is really challenging. Yeah, at the same time, it's so rewarding because you really get to go deep with yourself. You also, like for me at least, one of the things that I discovered, and you can tell me if this was your experience, is that when I started my project, I realized how many more strengths I have that I don't
mm-hmm,
value. People
mm-hmm.
would tell me like all these great things about me that I'll be like, that's me, that's not me. And it is a journey. It's absolutely a journey of like self-development. And I posted on Instagram recently, I saw somebody actually created a drawing, but you know how there's this saying of an entrepreneur is jumping off a cliff and building your plane or your parachute as you get down.
Mhm.
And that's really how it is. You don't have things figured out. And I also want to say that maybe you're being a little too hard on yourself, sister. um, like,
Always.
quitting your job seemed to be have been the right thing for you to do, though I get where you're coming from. It removed this safety net. Like, I think that the fact that you got to take that away actually brings you first to our conversation today, and then second for you to redo the podcast and to search for another place that is safe for you. For instance, we didn't share, but you actually moved, right? Do you mind sharing that part?
Yeah, yeah. I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which everyone, there's multiple opinions about this because people are like, what's in Tulsa, Oklahoma? And why would you move from New York City to Tulsa, Oklahoma? And then other people are like, that sounds really dope. But I'm actually doing a really cool program called Tulsa Remote. So look it up because I love more people to meet. But it's a beautiful opportunity. I feel like, I am meeting so many people. Even just now, I met people 2 days ago, and we're all doing National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo together. So we're all writing a book. So I'm gonna have a book out. I forgot to mention that to you, right? But I'm writing a book next month, and there's artists here. There's like so much stuff. It's also cost of living is cheap. Like you can buy a house here without like breaking the bank. There's just so much abundance here, and I think I needed to do that, and that's a change for me because I'm for the past few years I've been so risk taking,
Mm,
and I had to take a moment today to say I think I need to feel safe. Like I think I need some stability. I need some safety. I need a community that I didn't create, because I think that's another thing is like when you're being a leader, it is really lonely when everyone's following you and you're the only one, looking at it. And
mm,
for me, entrepreneurship, or when you are in your power, it can be like that because it's almost like you're in the jungle and you're like wanting a footpath, and you're like, oh, I'm making the footpath.
yeah.
Damn it. That's why it looks like a jungle in front of me. That's why it looks confusing. That's why it looks scary, because I'm literally with the machete cutting it down and making the footpath, because no one's walked this path. I haven't seen someone do it. No one showed me this. This is just on my own volition. So
Yeah.
I this is new for me to live in a smaller city and to allow myself to belong. I have like a little wound to get up around belonging. And so this is new for me in that front, and to feel safe again, because it's been so long since I felt fully safe, even in my body and my spirit and my energy, even though I'm teaching pleasure and I am, and it has got me through all these hard times. I really want to fully feel that most days. And I think with the pandemic and everything, we all could use an emphasis on safety. And, growth is great, but sometimes I just want to be the seed, and I just want to be encased and have potential, but where I am, And so I
Right.
think right now for me, like I'm cultivating a sense of safety and settling somewhere, and that's been a change for me as a person who's been traveling and starting businesses and doing all these new things. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is still new, but
Yeah,
um,
what I get from you is that you're in this place of a challenge right now,
mhm,
and you had this foundation, this safety place, and then you removed it because you're like, this is not for me. I want to do something else, and now you are in this place where like I actually do desire some of the safety that I had before, but I'm not going
mhm,
back to it the way I had it before. I'm gonna create it newly so I can keep all these things that I love about me and continue to do them, but still create a safety. And
yeah,
I think that, yeah, when we find ourselves in that position, things can look really dark. But in reality, it's that darkness is necessary and it's not actually bad. Usually, after the dark, the sun comes out, you have sunrise, and it's a continuous, it's
cycle.
a cycle, right? Like you keep going through it. And about the path, you made me think of one of my favorite quotes that got me through high school, specifically to high school, but it still gets me through today, is by Robert Frost. I took the path, the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And I
Mm,
think that if more people were to have to be brave as you are, and again, brave doesn't mean you don't have fear. It means that you walk with fear and you are there and connecting with it, but it doesn't disempower you. It is just an addition to make sure that you're safe and still walking on the path that you're supposed to. So yeah, I just really wanted to say that because I see your growth, I see your transformation, I see the journey that you have made. Yet, I guess for you, in some ways, is there still something missing, like that safety and that community? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Or that I think it's even that I'm actively intentionally creating. I think you said something before about like your skill set and not valuing it. I think that in a lot of ways, that sense of safety and the ways that people were in my life, it's not that maybe I didn't value it as much, but I didn't understand fully some of that non-tangible stuff
Mm,
that can be provided by tangible people and by tangible places and by tangible things. And so when you do start removing things from your life, I think I'm in a period of addition. Right now, for me, more is better. I'm adding, I'm taking a million classes, everything, more, 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 because at one point I was reading a book, Essentialism is actually what made me, that was the book that like I thought about it and I was like, I'm going to quit my job after this because it's like about removing things from your life, which I think is fine, but not for the sake of removing them, right? And so I think I have
Mm,
a more holistic sense now of some of the tangible and the non-tangible ways in which something or someone brings me value, where
yeah.
I value, and I think that's really important to think about.
Yeah, so and you don't have to share the company, but like do you mind sharing your role before you decided to quit and then go into a completely different role, which is what my understanding is knowing you a little bit.
Yeah, so I was at a tech company, a software company. I have my background is in technology, and I actually was a a program manager essentially at a startup, a global program manager. So, which is crazy because I was like, I was so young. I was like, I should not be managing a global program, but obviously I should have been because I did a good job. But
Great.
I'd worked at that company for a few years, and at a young age, was able to like kind of move up the ranks and manage a global program, which was really awesome because I got to fly to India and Australia and like all these places for free and have vacation, which made me want to travel more, and maybe quit my job. But I that's the kind of work I was doing, right? It was a lot of like training, enablement, program and project management and stuff like that. And so my role now, I now have a company that I also work for in addition to my businesses and artistic projects that I do. So in addition to that, now it's more product management and project management, which is really cool. It's in a new industry, which is also really scary. And I'm also realizing like I'm feeling very challenged there, which is like terrifying, but also really beautiful. So I think what the way that I'm seeing life now is how does this all fit into a bigger, larger picture? And how does
Hmm.
this all fit into my purpose, right? So I know a lot of times people are like, oh, I have this job, and it's like, not exactly what I want to be doing my whole life, but it's like, but it allows me to do these other projects, right? It
Hmm.
provides me that safety, security. It provides me with the money so I can take classes and gain skills and all these things and have time. So I see it as a larger, I see my life more like a big picture
Hmm.
with a lot of little pieces in it. And that makes me feel whole because I know all my parts and I know that all my parts are being tended to, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like unconsciously looking at it, which, last year and everything, it brought out parts of me that I had never seen of myself that I had to love myself through. And so, yeah, I think now I'm looking at it that way and project managing at work and my life.
Yeah, and you're taking that project and management into, yeah, into your businesses, into your projects,
Yeah.
which is a very important skill in order to manage all the projects. That's
Yeah.
something that I think it's very valuable. It's a life experience too, because
Hmm.
you're doing it. It's not just a theory or like you took classes on it. It's actually doing it.
Yeah, you have to
Um,
do it.
which brings me to the next part. Have you done any training around podcasting? Like, what is your education there? And like having you go into this project?
Experience. I
Yeah.
knew nothing about podcasting when I started a podcast. I just knew that I like talking. I like conversations. I find conversations nourishing, and sacred. And I wanted to have more of them. And I
Mm-hmm.
also know that I love learning and reading and thinking about ideologies and synthesizing things. And so I figured this would be a cool way to meet new people, talk about new things, synthesize my learnings, and have them documented somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no other experience podcasting except for podcasting,
Okay. Well, thank
which I
you.
think is the most valuable.
Yeah, and I think that is great because I think we also get stuck in this place of like, I need to get this education around this before I do it, and a lot of things don't require that. It's about just putting
Oh,
yourself out there and learning as you go, and letting go of the perfectionist, which is something I struggle with. I tend to want things to be perfect, just the way I vision it. And then, that's not how life works, and that's not how projects work, and that's not how growth works and transformation. So, what are some opportunities that you see and you've definitely shared quite a few of them, just you moving and starting your project and then quitting your job and then finding another job and continuing your projects on the side. Those are all opportunities in traveling the world. But like, what is something that you yourself could be like, okay, this podcast and this journey of becoming an entrepreneur is giving me this opportunities that I haven't seen before?
yeah. I guess the opportunities I see mostly are internal. I and I'm starting to as I talk to people, because I have a very full busy schedule, because I am really, now that I really value and understand and have done a project and have actually seen and had tangible results, it just makes you want to do it more for other things. And so you actually start having more capacity to do stuff, is what I've realized. And so as I talk to people nowadays and they're like, you're writing a book and you're doing a podcast and you work a full-time job and you have Spanish tutors every twice a week and an Arabic tutor twice a week and you work out and it sounds like one of those people who are like, I'm Tony Robbins, or like, I'm this and that and I do all this stuff. But you really do, like, doing makes you want to do more. And so I now, instead of like having the desire to have these like, I think I've learned now, like, the small wins matter so much.
Mm,
Having your episode just on there, and a link for you to share it, right? Even right now, I haven't like launched, like officially like published an episode, but I'm not craving it, right? So I can have a link to share it with somebody, because that felt so good to say I'm working on something and here it is. And it may not be perfect. And then also you realize that people don't have, like, you're in your own head about stuff, right?
right.
You mentioned perfectionism. My most listened to episode on the last podcast that I had was an episode where I was like in the pits of despair, and I could not see myself like writing or scripting an episode. And this was the first time I had done something by myself without a co-host, and I just like didn't know what I was doing. And so that's what I talked about. And it was unscripted, and there was gaps in it. It was unedited and unscripted. And I told the audience, this is unedited and unscripted. And there were big periods where I just was in my head and I thought, and then I spoke and I did stuff and I said stuff that I don't really remember, but those were the episodes that people came to me and said, thank you for doing that.
That's
Because I was like,
awesome.
I'm going to be really in my feminine. I'm going to be raw feminine right now. I don't know what I'm doing. And I feel sad and I feel this way, but I feel happy about this. And I'm scared and I'm this and that. And people were like, wow, most listened to episode, right? So I
Mm,
think like just having that experience, and I told them too, I said, I want to practice not being perfect. And I want to practice being okay with this, right? With who I am, where I am in this moment. And I also think it's a beautiful way for me to document where I was, right? Because yeah, we don't want to look back at your own life and look back and say like, oh, how did I get here?
right.
Right? I can see it. I can look back and stuff and laugh at how bad that episode was now, because 30 episodes later, I'm better and I'm okay with that. And everyone's followed me through this journey. So I think what I had to realize was like, it's not an end all be all. And I'm still learning progress versus perfection, because even this episode, it's going to be a blip, right, in someone's day, in someone's life, to you, right, and to me, right. It means something right now, but
Mm-hmm.
after you post this, you're going to be on to the next thing and the next one and the next one. You're going to look at this 10 years later when you continue doing it, and you're just going to think, wow, let's do another episode because that one wasn't the perfect one, or whatever. Or people might see your imperfections and what you think is an imperfection and find it courageous, right,
Right.
and valuable. So yeah.
Yeah. You brought a very good point up, and that is vulnerability. And And actually, the brand for Miljana, Monic, is what I am creating. Is the slogan is actually vulnerability is power. So you are
Mhm.
just really demonstrating that to us right now. And even this conversation, I know it's not gonna get edited much. Like I'll just cut some stuff out where it really made like a very big blip and made a mistake. But other than that, I don't edit my interviews much, like almost at all. So, like you're just really demonstrating that. And I think that's another reason why I'm here talking to you is showing people the vulnerability, showing people that we don't have everything figured out, that we are, we're not Beyonce. Though we
She
probably
doesn't probably feel like she has it figured out either.
exactly, but we don't get to see that. We
Yeah.
don't really get to see that, and that's what makes me sad is that we rarely get to see that, because even people who make it that far, though they don't have much to lose, they don't really show that side of themselves. It's very deep. It's not a pleasant experience to put yourself in such a vulnerable place and share it with the world. Like we have a hard time sharing it with people nearby, like our closest friends and family. Imagine showing it with the world. So you're bringing a very important point, that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay not to have things figured out. It's okay to not edit things and not have them perfect, and to show yourself as you are, because though someone might judge you, for many other people, you will actually be like hope and motivation and inspiration. And they will be like, oh my God, that person is going through that. And I can relate to it because I'm going through this, and it is so beautiful. So, next question for you would be like, what do you find rewarding about what you're doing currently? And I would say specifically around your podcast and other projects too, because they're all related, they're all connected. It's all about
Yeah.
provide us. It's all about bringing value to society.
I think first is having something mark that I'm here. Like I'm here, I lived, I have a perspective. And I think that for a long time, I didn't feel that it was valuable and I didn't think that it was helpful. And I didn't think that, and I even thought everyone thinks this way. I think in being bold enough to put yourself out there about anything, you often think that you have your worst fears, but like they never come true. Like your worst fears never ever come true. Like when's the last time like your worst fear actually came true? What I've been met with, and what I think it's a spiritual thing for me. It's like I'm almost met with like God, right? Like my book that I'm writing actually is going to be called "We" is the name of God, because it's about how collectively we are. Me, I know myself. You know yourself. This chair knows itself. That table knows itself. That blade of grass knows itself. We all collectively are the all-knowing one God. And so like with that being said, like I think that when I think about that, wait, remind me the question again, because I'm about to lose my train of thought, but I
That's
don't want to.
that's okay. What do you find rewarding about this journey that you are on?
Right. Yeah, is like we start collaborating, and I met with like acceptance and love. Whereas
Mm.
I think before I do it that, I'm going to be judged. And to be honest, if someone's judging me on Instagram, they're not about to write to me and tell me. They're going to do that in the privacy of their own home, and they're not going to probably write to me, right? Who I am met with are listeners, people who find my perspective valuable, people who are like, wow, where was this? I needed this, right? People who buy my community seats, right? People who want to train with me, and who I'm like, wait, you really think like, I don't think I know anything. They're like, oh no, you know so much more than I do. Right. So I met with acceptance and love, and like what you would assume like a loving like God would be, if that's the thing, like, right. It's the collective we, it's meeting me at my authenticity and telling me like, keep going, keep going, keep going. Like, it's okay. It's safe. Right. I like that analogy that you had of like building the parachute when you're coming down. Because I see it as like building the bridge as you walk on it. And it's like, yeah, the universe, like, keep going. I'm building the bridge. Like, take the step, take the step. And I find that really rewarding, because it goes against everything that I'm afraid of. And I get to be on the other side of fear, which feels so much better. So, like, knowing that I'm afraid of something and then getting to be on the other side and look at it and be like, oh, I did that. you know, that is it. And I know usually people are like, oh, it should be, people telling you something or like the pleasure you get from helping someone. No, like it's loving myself and feeling that I did something and that I'm a sovereign being and I didn't let fear decide for me,
Mm,
right? I let courage decide for me. I let vulnerability decide for me, honesty and my desires actually be fulfilled. Because it takes a lot of passion and discipline.
right, right. Oh, your answer is, first of all, it gave me goosebumps again, because I can relate to everything you're saying, that building of the bridge. And I feel like it's not even so much that you are building it, it's that as you're taking those action, the universe just builds it for you. And it
Hmm.
keeps putting the things in front of you that you have thought about or desired, but it's because you believe and you keep taking the actions towards it. And you're just demonstrating that for us right now. Um, I think we have come towards the end of our interview. I just want to ask you if there's anything that you would like to add or share with us that I haven't touched on so far.
Oh, nothing that you haven't touched on. Just, yeah, I'm excited. And as of right now, I just want to mention like, I have not published the first episode of this podcast. So now when I talk about it and everyone goes to look for it, it will be there, right?
Hmm.
So I think another, just a note is like, start before you're ready, right? I could have easily said, hey, Miljana, like, I can't talk about it because it's not out yet. It's not perfect yet. And it's like, whatever. But it's like, no, I'm going to do it. Right. And I think even just having that self trust now because I've done things and because I know I'm going to push myself forward because I've practiced it now. It's all a practice. So if it's your first time and you're scared, that makes sense, right? You only can get better with practice. And so I guess my words are like start before you're ready. That's the perfect time to start. And then it's a practice. Like it doesn't get easier. You just get better at it. Nothing ever gets easier. You just get better at it.
Yeah, I think you have a very good point. Start before you're ready, because I think most people never really end up being ready. We're rarely ever ready for the next step,
Yeah.
and you got to take that action, and then somehow you get ready, but then there's another step that you got to take, and then you're like, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
ready for that one, and the same thing happens. So thank you so much for putting it in that way. Like, you got to take chances, take the
Yeah.
chances, take a risk. Like you said earlier, like, if you think about your worst fears, how many of them have actually happened so far, and how often? Because most
Yeah.
of them don't happen. If we shouldn't say, like, I don't want to say all of them, because I think for some people they never happened. For most of us, they never
Yeah.
happened. For a few of us, unfortunately, they
Yeah.
happen, and I'm sorry for the people that are going through a difficult time. Um,
If I can, you can.
Oh, thank you so much. And right before we
Well,
close off, where can we find you? Because right now, I know this is being filmed right now, and it's gonna get posted within the next couple of weeks.
mhm.
I would like for you to tell us, where could we find you?
Yeah, so you can either find me at thepussypowerhour.com, so it should definitely be up. Um, or you can email me because I may not be on Instagram just yet, but you can email me at sovereign.sunmonu at gmail.com.
Okay, and I will also make sure to share those links and that information in the bio, and people will actually be able to just find the information. And your Instagram, any other social media, or those are the ones that you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, once you're on the website, you'll be able to tag it there. So it should be Pussy Power Hour, but pussy is spelled Pvssy because you're not allowed to use the word on Instagram or Gmail. So
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna have me. This is definitely a challenge I didn't think of until like a moment ago, of how to share this video, because I would not want to. My desire is to keep the word and hear us talk about it, because usually we bleep these words, right? For
Mhm.
just so the minor audience gets to also see this video, but at the same time, I do think it takes away from the video itself. So it's a challenge for me. I have never had to do this before with this video. Thank you so much, Sovereign, for spending the time with us today and with me specifically. I hope that everyone gets to enjoy this video as much as I enjoyed filming it and having this conversation. Felt it was really raw and authentic and heart to heart. And I hope that it really makes a difference for you. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. Please subscribe and also write any comments that you might have, or questions. I would love to hear from you. Bye bye.